You are listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. Something I totally love about this podcast is finding super fans of the band online around the world and inviting them on the podcast in order to make a new friend. I am absolutely pumped to bring you this conversation with new friend of the podcast, Raylee Perkins. Raylee lives in Regina, Saskatchewan, is a teacher, librarian, and co-host of the QueerEd podcast, which is two queer educators talking about 2S LGBTQ plus books for the K-12 classroom. You can find the show anywhere you get podcasts. I found Raylee's interest in the band while hunting for commentary on the 30th anniversary of How to Clean Everything. We got to chatting, and I'm delighted today to bring you this conversation where we discuss Bringer of Greater Things, Showdown, Nation States, Back to the Motor League, Dear Coach's Corner, and the work in schools as a librarian. I love these multi-song episodes because they often allow me the opportunity to revisit songs we covered in the very early days of the podcast. So, Showdown superfans, this one is for you. Go check out QueerEd Podcast on your podcast player of choice and follow them on Instagram at QueerEd_podcast. Please enjoy my conversation with Raylee Perkins. Raylee Perkins, welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda.
Hi, good to be here.
I am delighted that you're here. Raylee, since this is such a fun and random invitation that we connected on social media last week, I'm still getting to know you as well, but I'm wondering if you can just sort of introduce yourself a little bit to the audience out there so they know a little bit about you and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Raylee. My pronouns are she, her, and I am based here in Regina, Saskatchewan, Treaty 4 territory. And I am also an educator, currently working as a teacher librarian in the elementary school age, so K-8, kindergarten to grade 8. I lived in Vancouver I was born and raised here and then lived in Vancouver for about 13, 14 years, did my education out there, and then came home and started working here. And I'm an openly queer educator, and I really started noticing huge gaps in the sort of representation in the schools and in literacy and just the conversations that we need to have weren't happening when it came to like any sort of LGBTQ representation. Some teachers were doing it, but it was little bits here and there. And so I'm just like a huge book nerd. I will talk to anyone about books whenever anyone will listen, all the time. And so I just started talking about queer books with my colleagues, with the teacher across the hall, and bringing books into at that point, I was a classroom teacher, not a librarian. My librarian was really awesome and just like wanted to bring the books in, but kind of didn't know where to start. And so I just started saying, hey, here, buy this book, and we just really started bringing the books in. From that, we had, I don't want to get too much into the local politics here because not a lot of people care about local politics, but we had a really contentious school board vote in 2018 where the school board voted that we weren't allowed to fly the pride flag in schools. And that was just like that. I don't know the expression, just like it just sparked the fire in me. I just became like, I would say that was like the moment that radicalized me for the school systems. And so at that point, I like publicly came out very visibly because I wanted people to see me and hear me and the kids to have someone like a role model in the schools. And because of that vote, we actually ended up organizing at the municipal level and like voted out the really gross former school board members and brought in a very progressive school board. I wasn't the only person doing that. There was like a whole team of really amazing people organizing on the ground, as there is. And now we have like policies around LGBTQ. We have like a diversity coordinator who works to help bring this stuff in, and not just for LGBTQ representation, but for like BIPOC, Indigenous, Black, anti-racism, anti-oppressive, like just across the board. We've really kind of changed the conversations that are happening at the school board level with policy, because that's what we were missing before. And so then, because I like to talk about books so much, my friend Brendan is a high school teacher, and he is also an openly queer educator who's also talking about books, but he did the high school level and I did the kind of elementary. And he just kind of came to me on a whim, like kind of out of nowhere, and was like, hey, do you want to do a podcast where we just talk about this? Like, and so we started a podcast last September. I think we've recorded about 13 or 14 episodes now. And it's called QueerEd, or QueerEd, like QueeRed. You can find us QueerEd_podcast on Instagram. Twitter is a little bit. We're not as much on Twitter. I'm trying to learn TikTok. I guess that's a thing that people use. But yeah, so we're starting this podcast, and we've gotten accepted to speak at a couple conferences, and we're just really trying to get the conversation out to as many people as possible. And really the point of the podcast is to not only is just to like really share, because so many teachers come to me and they say, I just don't even know where to start, or I have a kid whose parent just came out as trans, and like I don't know how to have that conversation in the classroom. And we were like, here are the books. Like, I just think books and stories are the way to empathy. I think they're the way to understanding. Like, I think there's so much learning that happens with fiction and nonfiction, but like with fiction, to help our students have language and vocabulary and empathy, honestly, just empathy. And so, you know, teachers will come to me and ask for book recommendations for this situation or that situation or whatever. And so this podcast is a way to kind of get it so that I'm not having individual conversations every day with 20 people. It's like, here's a way to get the information out to as many people as possible. So that's amazing. What we've been working on since September.
Wow. Are you, how are you feeling? Has there been any reception of that? How's that podcasting journey going for you? And are you enjoying it? Are you getting some good feedback?
I love it. Again, because it's just another opportunity for me to talk about books and have whatever. You know, we did a bit of a slow start because we were both sort of learning the ropes between Brendan and I with the like tech piece and how to get it out there. And we're starting to get a bit of a following. People will send us a note or Instagram message or something. And I think every week, you know, someone recommends it to one more person or two more people. We're very much in those infancy stages. Mm-hmm. We are speaking at 2 conferences in May, and one of them is the Saskatchewan School Library Association. So it's not just school libraries. No, sorry, Saskatchewan Library Association. So it's not just school libraries. It's public, all legal libraries, every library. And so we're hoping that can start to get the word out to different communities, because right now it's very Regina educator focused, because it's a lot of our friends and people who have worked with us who are listening to it. But we'll still do it. I said to Brendan, like, even if the same 8 people listen every week, like, I love doing it, and those 8 people are listening, and hopefully they're learning something. And yeah, it's really great. I love it.
That rocks. And, you know, because you mentioned something really important. So I was an English teacher for a long time, and the sheer overwhelming amount of books that come out in the world is so overwhelming for teachers, because a lot of teachers get really stagnant in the books that they choose because there's so much choice, and planning new stuff is so hard as a teacher that you tend to revert back to the stuff you've already done in the past just because you're so busy, that the thought of doing something brand new is like such a laborious and overwhelming task. So to have somebody like you, you know, doing a lot of the heavy lifting of finding awesome titles, that really is quite a service to, especially to the work that teachers are doing as well.
Well, and I think there's a lot of LGBTQ books out in the world. I mean, I wished I would have had this representation when I was a kid. I think I would have figured myself out so much sooner. It took me a long time to sort of figure out what my words were, what my identity was, like all of those pieces. I was pretty late coming out in the world. And I just think, if I would have had those role models, even if they were fictional role models, I think I would have been able to sort some things out in my brain a lot sooner. And but there's also a lot of the queer books, and I just use the term queer very like sort of as an umbrella sort of term, all encompassing. I find that a lot of them are sort of, there's a lot of tropes, there's a lot of stereotypes. There's also a lot of like trauma in the book. So often it's like the being gay or the being queer, being trans is like the source of conflict. And I mean, that's often the narrative that some people live. I'm not denying that, but like we are also trying to say like there's happy times too, and there's queer joy, and there's love and community, and like there's so many other ways to talk about queer people that aren't just the trauma and aren't just the sad stories. And so we're really trying to give that balance of, this is the lived narrative of a lot of people, and we know what the impacts are on our LGBTQ youth if they aren't seen, if they don't have affirming adults in their life. And I think like I'm coming to you from Canada, and I mean, we were just talking before we started recording about how you're in the States and it's a bit of rose-colored glasses, and I sort of look at what's happening, especially down in the southern states right now, with like the book bans and the anti-trans law and all of the just grossness that's happening in the schools down there. My heart, it breaks for the teachers, like just knowing that they are just at risk all the time of being threatened by these awful laws and policies. But it just breaks for the children, because they need to see themselves. And like I said, because Brendan and I are both white settlers here on treaty territory, we want to speak to our lived experiences. And so we do try and bring in people from like the Indigenous community and Muslim community. Like we do have guests that will come and speak to other narratives that aren't our story to tell. And I just think like the colleague said to me once, but like, I don't have any like queer kids in my classroom or queer families in my classroom. Like, and I was like, yeah, like straight kids need to hear these stories too. First off, like everybody needs to hear these stories, but also like, yes, you do have queer kids in your classroom, whether you know it or not, whether they know it or not.
Yeah.
Like there's like, we're there. We've always been there. We're always going to be there. And so like, if you said, well, I don't have any Indigenous kids in my class, so do I really need to tell like Indigenous history? Like, yeah. White people need it more than anything.
Yeah.
Like colonizers need it more than anything. Like, so that was sort of, again, a moment that was just very like powerful for me. And she meant it from a good place. Like she wasn't trying to be hurtful or, just very sort of, like you said, like just overwhelmed with learning about it. And also I think people, and I do this too, again, like, I'm worried because I do try and bring in, like I said, representation across the board. My sort of overarching theme or mantra that I use when I'm thinking about planning and curriculum is like, do my students see themselves in the halls and on the walls? So that means like posters, stories, like scientists. Like anytime I'm bringing anything in, I'm like, is there someone who is Black who has done this and, historically or whatever, so that they're not just seeing the white dude in a lab coat, which is what has sort of been our trajectory up until this point. And so when I think about in the halls and on the walls, that's, do my colleagues, do my families, do my community see themselves? Like it's not just the students, right? And I think it's important for all students to see every representation, not just their own.
Amazing. Well, I was looking at the description of your podcast too, and you have a term on here that I think would be important to go over for the listeners out there.
Yeah.
And it's 2S LGBTQ plus. And so this is a variation of this acronym that I've never seen before. And so I'm wondering if you can just break down this term for me, just like very simply for the listeners out there too.
Yeah, so I think most people are familiar with LGBTQ.
Mm-hmm.
So lesbian, gay, bi, trans, and then queer is the Q, or questioning, like depending. Some people kind of use either.
Yeah.
And then plus is just, there's so many other. There's intersex, there's like non-binary, there's just like between gender and sexuality, there's just so many things that that
Yeah.
term, that little tiny plus sign represents. But the 2S stands for two spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is, are you familiar with the term two spirit?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's an Indigenous term, sort of, and I'm still sort of unpacking what I know about the term, but the way it was sort of explained to me is that in the Indigenous communities, and every Indigenous community like is so broad, like there's no one pan Indigenous community, but two spirit sort of embraces or sort of encompasses people who are maybe trans or like non-binary, or sort of like between, like have both male and female parts, or not parts, like pieces to them.
Mm-hmm.
And historically, there's like, they didn't start using the term two spirit until I think someone coined it at a conference or something in the, I want to say the 90s. I don't have the exact date on me, but I mean, two spirit people have always existed. There have always been Indigenous people who are not male and not female, and they've always just been a part of the community. And it
Mm-hmm.
was colonizers and that sort of erased the identity of the two spirit people, because we had a very binary way of like, nope, you are male or female, like those are the two. But apparently, and again, like historically, like two spirit people were known as almost like mediators, kind of just as I almost think of the term liminal space, and I don't know if that's a term that I want to use or that people would be okay with me using, but kind of just that in between, that nuance, that you can kind of fit in both worlds. You can kind of talk to both worlds and both communities, and so that's sort of the 2S. And people have started championing. Lots of people will say LGBTQ 2S plus, and I say it first as much as I can, because I really want to highlight the two spirit, because they have been so relegated to the very, very darkest margins for so long. So I kind of want to have them front and center when I use the term. And I don't always, but that's sort of when I do, that's kind of the intention behind it.
Amazing. Well, I love that. Thank you so much for that description. I think that that's really important. And I love how you said that you're still kind of making sense of it. And I think that whenever we're having conversations like this, one of the most important things that we can do as conversation partners is give the other person the benefit of the doubt, that they're like coming at this as from an open mind, from an open heart, with a intention to personally grow, and giving each other some space to think and unpack terms and awareness around a variety of issues is super important. So I definitely appreciated your clarifier there, but that was very nicely said.
Well, and I think it's important as teachers that we say, we might be getting this wrong. We might not have all the information, or we might change our mind.
Yeah, totally.
Like, next week, if more information comes out, or I read a new article, and I'm going to update my current context of information to like incorporate, throw away the stuff that doesn't work anymore, keep the stuff that works, and I just think it's really important to model that knowledge isn't concrete. It's not going to stay the same. It's always going to grow and evolve, and things that you once thought were true maybe aren't true anymore. And that's okay to just say, I made a mistake, or I didn't have all the information at the time. And I think we could navigate a lot of problems if people could just admit that, hey, what I once knew isn't maybe true anymore, or fully true anymore, right?
Yeah, totally. I love that. Well, Raylee, it's so great to get to know you and to hear about your work that you're doing over at the QueerEd or QueerEd podcast. I think that that's fantastic that you're highlighting these amazing books and, helping the teachers that you work with and creating the space to talk about these works of literature. I think that's fantastic. So let's do a little something that I do here on this podcast, and let's switch gears a little bit over to music. Tell me a little bit about your musical journey as a fan of music too.
Okay, so I grew up in a really small town here in rural Saskatchewan. I say like up until probably grade 7 or 8, I had the like small town cabaret playlist. I don't know if you know that. It was like probably a
Uh-uh.
lot of AC. Cabaret is like a small town party, often a lot of beer, Coors,
Nice.
Pilsner. And you would get a lot of like AC/DC, Bon Jovi, like the classic rock, sort of
Yeah.
classic country. That was sort of like, my musical upbringing as a small child on a farm in Saskatchewan. I was lucky in that my brother and sister were a few years older than me, and they started introducing me to like better
Mm.
music than some of my peers. So, grade 7, 8, it was the grunge Seattle sound, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, Nirvana, like that. Then I got into the Pixies, which was like pretty eye-opening for me. And then like the Dead Milkmen, if you're familiar with the Dead Milkmen, they
Yes.
were, yeah. And so then I wasn't really into punk. Like that hadn't like, I don't know how you classify Dead Milkmen. That would probably be as like punk rock as I had kind of gotten. With the exception of I had Green Day Dookie in grade 8. That was a big, big album for me. We listened to a lot of Green Day. And then I went to high school in the big city of Regina. It was like a huge change for me. There's
Yeah.
like my grade 8 class had 12 people in it. The same 12 people went to school from kindergarten to grade 8. And then I went to grade 9 and there was like 350 people in my grade 9 class. Like it just blew my mind. And I met this girl, her name was Ashley. She was dating a boy with a mohawk who had a car. It was like, holy cow, in grade
Oh
9.
man.
That was a very big deal. And we went back to Ashley's place one night after hanging out with her boyfriend, and he left us the How to Clean Everything album. And
Okay.
it's like 38 minutes. It's really short, right?
Uh-huh.
It's like the track time is very, very short. And it blew my mind. She put it on her CD on repeat. I think we listened to it all night, probably like, I don't know how many times because it's so short. And I remember sitting there and listening to it on repeat for this entire night. And I was just like, what is even happening to my brain right now? Like, so when I think this is how we first connected over this podcast, is you had said something, it's their 30 year, the How to Clean
Mm-hmm.
Everything, 30 years. And I said, my God, like this album wasn't only like my gateway album to the band, but it was like my gateway album to punk rock as a genre.
Oh,
And like,
good.
what an introduction to the genre, like you can't get more punk than How to Clean Everything. Like to this day, I know the criticisms of the album, I'm fully aware of it, but like, what an amazing album.
Amazing. I
And
love that that was your
so,
yeah, I love that that was your intro to the full genre essentially too.
yeah, and so after that, I started getting into like Strung Out, Bad Religion, Face to Face, Blink 182. Did you ever listen to the Smalls? They were like a smaller Canadian sort of band.
No, I never
Um,
have.
yeah, so like that kind of opened up my doors to like all of those other bands. And then, but also like to like challenge my brain over like, oh wait, like these systems that we have in place, and you can say those things about them, you can be critical of whole, like we came from a family of like very conservative small town like values, and you just didn't rock the boat. You did not question the army, you did not question the government as long as the government was conservative. You definitely questioned the government if they were left or liberal or NDP. But
Mm-hmm.
um and so just hearing people say like bad words about the government and your dad and the army and the troops, like it blew my mind. I couldn't
Mm.
put it down. And I remember because once I got my license, I used to drive into the city, and it was about a 35-minute commute from my farm to the high school. And the album, I could play How to Clean Everything from beginning to end, from like the moment I left my farm till the minute I got to the school parking lot. it pretty much was like one of the only albums that was in my car for the first year I drove it. And once I even got pulled over for speeding, and I was listening to it right as the line "fascist cops"
Yeah.
came in, and I was like, "Oh no, no! You don't want to turn it off, turn it off, turn it off."
Amazing.
You don't want the cops to do that.
Amazing. I love it. Whenever I do these kinds of episodes where we talk about multiple songs, something that's really interesting is that the process that people go through in order to actually nail down the songs they want to talk about. And
it was so hard.
Well, I know. So your selections that you chose are Showdown from How to Clean Everything, Nation States from Less Talk More Rock, Back to the Motor League from Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes, and Dear Coach's Corner from Supporting Cast. So first of all, kudos to you for choosing 4 different records to talk about. I love when that happens, when there's no overlap between the album. Tell me a little bit about your process for, narrowing down and coming to your final 4 selection.
So I am an academic by trade. Like, I'm a geek. I like to do research. And so when you reached out to me, I automatically went into research mode, because I am not a music snob. I'm not a music person. I am that person who everyone's like, "Hey, do you know so-and-so?" And I'm like, I have no idea who you're talking about. And then they're like, "Oh, like the singer of the band, the t-shirt that you're wearing." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I love that guy." But I don't have that in my brain. It's not the kind of way I listen to music. I just put on a song, and if I bang, and it's great, And so first thing I did is I went through every album chronologically from How to Clean Everything to their newest album, and then and listen to them in order, because I really feel like Propaganda, there's a few bands, but Propaganda is definitely one of them. The albums are meant to be listened as a whole, not on shuffle, not on a playlist. Like, they're a complete piece in and of themselves. So I put on each album, and anytime I just even paused for a second, I put it on a playlist. Like, I just like, oh, this song or that, And I think I had it like 36 songs or something just from that initial pass through.
Yeah.
And I started reaching out to all of my friends who would have been Propaganda fans. And what was really interesting, no one, with the exception of one of my friends, could tell me their favorite song and album. Everyone else had to be like one of my friends was like, no hesitation. He knew right away which one it was, and he could, but all my other friends were like, "Oh, like this one's really good." But then like, "Oh, when we're at the show and like they play this song," like everyone really had to like think about it. And it's one of the only bands so when I moved to Vancouver, I moved with like a punk hardcore band. I was dating one of the guys in the band. And so I lived with like music people, and I lived in the jam spot, and like all we did was music all the time, and going to like CD East Van bars, listening to like CD East Van punk bands and things like that. So I kind of reached out to all of them, and they were like, "Oh, but this song and this song." And so once I got my, like, I think I said I had like 36, I listened to just that playlist and slowly started weeding it down to there. And then I got it down to 10. And then that's when I really started pulling in like my own history and my stories and my sort of experiences with the songs. And I got it to 5. And I almost emailed you and said, "Can we just do 5 songs? Because I don't think I can cut." And then I even changed it on you. I had 4 songs, and then I had to change my list again because I was like, nope, we need to talk about this.
So you cut Bringer of Greater Things, and
it breaks my heart.
Well, I have to ask you about Bringer of Greater Things because it's so specific to Saskatchewan locally.
Yeah.
because of the content and the Starlight tours and the habit of Saskatchewan police to, essentially pick up Indigenous men and drop them off in the middle of nowhere so that they freeze to death in the middle of the night. And I just wanted to give you the space to comment on that if you wanted to really quick.
Yeah, so it came out, I think, in 2005. It's on Potemkin, right? And so at that time I was living in Vancouver. I lived there from like 2001 to about 2013. And I had left when I was still really young. Like I was like 20 when I moved to Vancouver. And so I still hadn't unpacked a lot of the like entrenched racism that was happening here. I knew it was there. Like it's so clear, but I like my own brain hadn't started kind of making sense of what was going on. I don't know if I fully understood everything. Just that it existed and that it was really bad. And that there was definitely like two tiers of people and two tiers of the way people were treated. Then I moved away, and the racism in Vancouver is a very different form of racism. It's just a very different experience there. And so then when I moved back in 2013, I don't know if you've ever had the experience of like listening to a band from a certain city or certain area, and then you go to that region and they make so much more sense once you see where they're from.
Yep.
And so Bringer of Greater Things wasn't on my radar until I was living back here after 2013. And I started listening to that album more. That album is just a classic. It's such a great album. And, then I started doing a lot of learning of the Indigenous history of the peoples here. And so the Starlight tours were part of it. We had, we had a case here in, I think, 2017, where a young Indigenous man was shot by a farmer, and the farmer got off with no murder charges, even though it was very clear. His name was, the young Indigenous man was Colton Boushie. So just like two classes of justice, two treatments of police, like the incarceration rates here of Indigenous people, just all of it. And this song hit harder and deeper once I started learning about just all of the things that were going on here. And like, I know people, like it's Regina, Saskatchewan, it's like a pretty small community, even if, and so, people who know, not that it should make it any different, but people who knew the guys on the Starlight tour, like Neil Stonechild. We know people who are representing them still in court, you know what I mean? And fighting the fights. And, we had a university professor here who wrote a book about it. And she is fighting legally because they tried to someone else wrote a book about Neil Stonechild and she spoke out against it. And now they're going after her for I don't want to say slander because I don't know exactly what they're going after her for, but basically like they don't want her talking crap about this book because it was a very, I don't want to say pro-police because I haven't read the book, so I can't say firsthand, but like it showed it more in favorable lights than maybe it should have. And so to me, being back in Saskatchewan and just my own reconciliation of being here in this space is when that song just hit every nerve in my body. And to cut it, like I said, I went back and forth between Bringer and Coach's Corner.
Yeah.
Those are the two things that I couldn't do it.
Well, I've just, brought us together to have this 5-song chat. So I was going to surprise you by asking you about Bringer of Greater Things anyway, and breaking my own rules because I answer to no one on this podcast except
it's your podcast.
I know we're doing the 5-song one, so that's totally fine. So awesome comments on Bringer of Greater Things. When we did that episode, that was one of the earliest ones we ever did. And when I dug into Bringer of Greater Things specifically, I started to really comprehend that this podcast was going to be much, much harder of a job than I anticipated. I figured this podcast would be something like we'll do 30-minute episodes about every song. And then some of the episodes are over 4 hours, 5
I
hours.
know.
So it's just one of those things to where when you peel back the layers of a song like Bringer of Greater Things, you really start to understand the scope and the magnitude of what this band is actually doing and how powerful the backstories are that inspire the songs in the first place. So I love that you had thoughts on Bringer of Greater Things, because by doing this podcast, I came to appreciate songs like Bringer of Greater Things that maybe on like just as a fan of the record, like weren't my favorite songs on the record. But then when you dig into them, you're like, wow, this is actually a perfect song. And holy smokes, I was an idiot for overlooking it for so many years.
Well, and I always say as a librarian for so long, everyone's like, oh, you're such a good storyteller. Like you're so good at reading books and telling stories. And so for a long time, people would call me a storyteller. And like my mom would say from the day I was born, I was came out telling stories, and I've sort of shifted my mentality to be like, I think I'm actually more of a story collector. They're not my stories. I'm collecting them. And when you need a particular story, I can share it with you and it'll hit what you need. And then I share this story with you. And I just hold them all. And so I think for me, like the story of Greater Things is like, I collected it and there are people who need to hear it and there are people who need to understand it. Some for firsthand grief to help them come to terms with what's going on. Some because they need to learn about the actual history of this province, and you talk about rose-colored glasses and how you look across the border to your neighbors at the north, like we've got a lot of problems here too, And sometimes we like to be like, oh, but we're not those Americans. And
Exactly.
It's like, no. Like, let's shine a light on some of the issues here. And I think that Bringer of Greater Things, the storytelling and the layers of stories in that song are just so complex.
Yeah.
And I said, when I was doing my research, which was very official for this podcast, I said, I almost wish I could have made 2 lists for you. And I think I could have done 4 banger songs. Like these are just the songs I put on and I bang and I just love and they just get me like pumped up. And I could have probably nailed it down to like 4 thinking songs or like, holy, they're saying so much. And I feel like those 2 lists, I could have easily probably picked 4. So trying to pick, like bring those down into like, do I talk about the banger songs or do I talk about the thinker songs, the songs that open my own mind,
Well, you've got a good mixture of both on the list. So let's dive into your list here. So just a total for transparency's sake, when we made our Showdown episode, it was very early on and we were very harsh on that song. I think that when we started the podcast, we were trying to prove that we could actually be critical of the songs as well as, adoring and fawning. So Showdown was one of the ones that when we did, we were like, yep, nope, this is a stinker. And then we basically discarded it. Yeah. So we got shredded in the comments and emails from our treatment of Showdown. So I am delighted that you chose it. So tell me why, out of all the songs on How to Clean Everything, you picked Showdown, GEP, Greenest Eyes, for your first song selection.
Quiet softest sighs, song for all of those who shot and missed. Welcome to this world in good identity, one day dead to pacified, generously bestowed, our rights and privilege replete with.
So I think that. Oh, so this is so tough for me because I could have put the song list on a dartboard and threw a dart and any song off of How to Clean Everything I could talk about. Like,
yeah,
I knew I had to pick one from that album for sure because it was such an impactful album. It really, really could have been any of the songs. So the reason I picked Showdown is because I think that when this album was introduced to me, I was so naive and ignorant, and I don't use ignorant in like you're so ignorant, but just like literally did not know, right? And How to Clean Everything just like hits you over the head with like the criticisms. It's not nuance. There's no nuance. There's no gray in any of the lyrics, I find, on How to Clean Everything. And I think Showdown really, it has the two distinct songs, and I did actually listen to the tracks you sent me with the two distinct.
Sweet.
It's very cool. It's very, very cool.
Waking up each morning with confusion in my eyes, wind is biting through to wave hello, seeing my reflection an exterior of lies, hope the shaky feeling doesn't show, as if I had to tell you there was little left to say.
But at that point, I still was like this 14, 15-year-old girl who kind of liked songs about sad and love and loneliness and cute girls with green eyes, you know what I mean? So John K. Samson's lyrics really stood out to me. But then also it was like partnered with these like, but also I'm angry and I'm learning about all the reasons why I'm angry.
Yeah.
And so it was, but also I'm like happy and I want to have a crush on this cute skater boy. Like that was me. And so when you folks talked about it on the show, you sort of talked about how it was like a showdown between the two artists of like what Samson was trying to do and what the other lyrics were trying to do. And to me, I feel like that resonated with me when you were talking about it. I did listen to that episode. I had some thoughts on it. But to me, I think it was like a showdown of myself, of like reconciling those two parts and like trying to like figure out that identity piece of like, can these two parts coexist? Can I be like, I don't know. And so like that showdown of like this small town, conservative, like naive, young little girl, like literally little girl. Like I look at my own kid now who's 10 and I'm like, oh my God, I was like 3 years older than you when I was having these thoughts in my head, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But then the other piece of just like the angry political activist, like, so to me, Showdown is like me reconciling the two pieces of myself. And so then years later, someone introduced me the Weaker Thens. Like I had never, again, I'm not a person, I don't follow all the charts and all the bands coming out and whatever. I was so lucky to live with musicians who did all the labor for me. And someone had put on a Weaker Thens album, and Samson's voice is just so distinct, right? Like it's just, you know, you're listening to John K. Samson when that song is on. And I was like, hey, that's the Greenest Eyes guy. And they all looked at me like, what are you talking about? And I was like, you know, Girls with the Greenest Eyes. And they're like they couldn't figure out what I was saying. And I had to like go and put the song on. I'm like, that's this guy. And they're like, yes, Raylee, he was in Propaganda. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense now. Gotcha. Because I hadn't put those two pieces together. And I have since become a huge Weaker Thens fan. Like I love John K. Samson. I love his lyrics. It's a different genre for me. It's a different feel. I put it on when I'm feeling different things than when I put on my punk rock albums, my Propaganda albums. So I think for me, that's kind of why I needed to choose Showdown. Again, like the opening track on How to Clean Everything was like the runner up for sure. Just because it was the first thing I ever heard, you know, that intro, those like, I could put it on right now and sing every lyric to every song on that album, front to back, on repeat.
I love that.
That was my rationale.
I love that you can do that. And I also like the idea of turning the showdown to highlight things within our own selves. Like, that's a really fascinating way of saying that, because I don't know if I really considered the fact that like, yeah, you can be like a romantic, loving, sweet, kind person, but also be super pissed at the same time. Like I love the fact that it just kind of highlights human complexity and different personalities, but how you can have so many different things within one single person. I really like the way that you just said the showdown was within you. That kind of helps me reframe the meaning of the song a little bit.
Well, and like, you know, at that point, like I said, I'd come to high school. I started hanging out with like the punk kids, the skater boy, you know, all that crew.
Yeah.
But, you know, on the weekends, I'd still go to like the small town bush parties with the hockey players and the bros, you know? And so I hadn't really figured out where I fit, and I liked both, and I could fit in both worlds really easily. Like even now I could go to my small town with my Pilsner and I talk to everybody, you know?
Yeah.
But like I'm much more critical of it than
Yeah.
I remember once I showed up at a small town bush party, like just like a couple years ago, and I have a shirt that says heteronormativity is a cult.
Mm.
And like all the guys I went to, or not guys, people I went to school with were like, what's heteronormativity? And I was like, oh, neither do
Yeah.
I don't live here anymore, but I love you guys. But like, they just haven't changed, right? They've lived in the same world for 40 years. Like I'm 41. So
Yeah. Amazing. Cool. Well, I love this view of Showdown. So you did listen to the ones that I sent you, which is really cool because John's version, the acoustic version, is like this really kind of like this like fast strummy song with like a little bit of off-key singing here and there and a really wonky recording, which is really fun. And then Chris's version is after John left the band. For some reason, the band decided they were going to open their sets with Todd on bass in 1996. Like right when Todd joins the band, they're still opening the show with a John-less version of Showdown. Tell me just like quickly, when you were listening to these two different versions, like just what was kind of running through your mind about what you thought about the two.
I at the time, and now like hindsight, 2020, but like I didn't feel at the time that they were so distinct. Like, and then when you pulled them apart and I listened to them, I'm like, these are really two completely different bands, different genres, different songs, like different just vibe. Like the vibe of both is just so like, and like part of me is like, why did they decide to co-write this song?
Yeah.
Why didn't they just let Samson write his song, play on it, and I don't know. So that was my thing, is like, what was the rationale? And I haven't listened to any of his podcasts to see if he's ever given a rationale of like, what was the thought process behind mashing those two songs together?
Yeah.
And like, it just is confusing. That's just confusing to me.
Yeah. I may have to, nudge Chris to do a Patreon episode just about Showdown, because I think that'd be so fun. Because the opening riff of Showdown is so good too. You know what I mean? It starts off. It's just
I know.
solid, catchy opening hook riff. I just love it. So, I mean, I love them apart because I'm just like, playing. It's sort of like forcing myself into being this like critical person on the show, and people have really loved Showdown, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, but I love them apart so much as well. So it's just kind of like the way that I've fallen as as time has passed on the podcast.
Well, and I think because so there was this club here on all ages venue called The Exchange. It still exists. Like you can still go to shows there. It's fantastic. It's like one of the like staples of the Regina music scene. Have you ever been to a show here?
No, I never have, unfortunately. I saw tons of shows up at like Amigos in Saskatoon and Louis Pub and stuff like that, but I never got down to Regina, unfortunately. I didn't have a car when I lived there, so it was kind of like not really accessible.
So The Exchange is a like combo all ages / bar. Like you can get beer there. Sometimes there's not all ages allowed. Sometimes it's only all ages and no beer, like kind of goes between both worlds. But at 15 years old, it was like the only place you could see live music in this city. Like, and because we're only like Regina's about 4.5 hours from Winnipeg, and I Spy is from here.
Yep.
I don't think I saw them. I think I was getting into I think they'd already disbanded. When did they disband? Like when did they break up?
Yeah, they were kind of disbanding in like 1995, 1996, because by the time Todd joins Propaganda in 1996, I think that I Spy was pretty much done.
Yeah, but that's when I would have come into the world. Like I was in grade 9, I was in 96, I think. I came into grade 9. But like we had some fucking rager all ages shows at The Exchange.
Yeah.
Like and like to this day, some of the best shows I've ever been at, even though I went to, like I said, like punk rock shows in like skeezy East Van bars with like just ragers. Something about an all ages punk show at the Exchange in Regina, like I think we're cold, we're cranky, it's miserable here, and there's just a lot of like pent up. And because we don't get a lot of really great shows, like a lot of bands will skip Regina, they go to Saskatoon. There's so many more venues.
Yeah.
But Propaganda, like they were here all the time. Like I just felt like they were just kind of a bit of a revolving door. There was like a few bands that just always kind of seemed to play, and I don't know if it was because I Spy with that connection with Todd, like maybe, I don't know, but I think I saw them like maybe 3 or 4 times in like grade 10 and 11. Like I feel like I just always saw them, and like that song was just so good. Like I still remember the very first time I was 15 years old seeing them, and I was sitting on the stage and someone had said, "Don't wear your Doc Martens because they're vegans and they really don't like leather." Like it was like thing, and I was like, oh my god, I don't want to wear my Doc Martens, like I don't want to piss off Propaganda. And like I have a visceral reaction to that song when I hear it, because it just takes me back to that club and that scene, and like just all of it.
Amazing. Well, let's jump forward a little bit in time. We got 3 years later, 1996 is Less Talk, More Rock. And your selection from that record is And We Thought That Nation States Were a Bad Idea.
Publicly subsidized, privately profitable, the anthem of the upper tier, puppeteer, untouchable, focus a moment, not in approval, bury our heads in the barcodes of these neo-colonials. A former nemesis, the romance of the nation state. Now place on race for a new bed power, concentrate. Try again, but now we're confused. What is class war? Is this class war? Yes, this is class war.
So tell me a little bit about your choice and reason for choosing Nation States as your next song.
So Less Talk, I didn't get into initially, and now I recognize it's a really solid album. But at the time, I don't think I was ready for it. It was too smart for me. Like I honestly was like, the lyrics and everything they were trying to say, like I was like, I don't have Google. I'm like dictionarying like all these words, and like, what are you talking? Like I didn't have like the contextual knowledge to really like figure out a lot of the stuff that they were saying. I liked it, but like I said, whereas How to Clean Everything is, hey, Poppy, get down. Sorry. Like Less Talk was just so much more. Like in general, musically, lyrically, and all. I think that was the one that had all the things you should read on the inside cover.
Yep.
Keep in mind too, like we don't have Spotify. I don't have, like, the only way I'm getting a CD is at a show, or stealing it from a friend, or like going to like HMV, I think, or A&B Sound. Like I think those were like the 2 places that I could get music from. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I actually didn't have a copy of Less Talk myself, but I'd Rather Be Flag Burning. That was like a split, right?
Yep, with I Spy.
Okay, so I couldn't remember, because I was like, how do I know this Nation States? Like this song is just like, it rocks. Like it's a rocker. It's one of my banger picks, you know? I'm just going to pull up the lyrics here because I wrote some notes about them. But when I started like looking, because I'm a very visual person, and so when I went through and started looking at all the albums, I was like, oh, I had that album. It's like the guy pushing the broom.
Yeah.
On the album cover or whatever. Like I was like, oh, that's why I know this song, because it's on there. And I had that album, and it was like, again, kind of one of those ones that was like on repeat. But it's just like his lyrics in that song, and like how much he packs into, just like he just packs so much into, like, how long is the song? Like 2.5 minutes or something. It's really, really short. Like,
really short.
Are really, really short. But that was like, I feel like to me, Nation States, like I was still fully entrenched in How to Clean Everything, and Nation States was like that little piece that like nudged me forward musically, and nudged me forward like thinking, like with my brain, like, oh, and like that's when I would have started reading like Noam Chomsky and like all of the things that they eventually introduced me to. And I do think that they're the reason I read those things or have read those things, you know, like that, him and like Greg Graffin, you know, my friend actually did her PhD in biochemistry because of Greg Graffin. Like,
amazing.
Who does that, you know? But the rest of the album was really, it was a lot more for me to chew on. It was a lot meatier, and I just don't think I was quite ready for it when it came out. It took me a while to sort of like unpack it all and like and really understand it in a way. Now I see how just solid it is. But that flag burning EP or like record was just rad. It was such a great album.
Did you have the flag burning on vinyl or on CD? Because there were two versions that existed.
I had it on CD.
Nice. Yeah, there was a version of CD that was like handmade cardboard packaging and stuff like that you could really only get at like their live shows. Like when Beav was on the podcast, he showed me, he's like, yeah, I bought this CD from one of the shows in the 90s, and then I wound up joining the band, and it's just so surreal. So it's just really funny to me.
Yeah, I'm assuming I would have picked it up at a show. Like that would have been... I don't have it anymore. I got rid of all my CDs, and now I'm so sad.
Yeah.
Because I don't have any like physical, tangible like memories of them to hold on to. But I'm assuming either I picked it up at a show or I stole it from someone who picked it up at a show. That would be my guess.
You know, there's a lot in this song as well, but to me, like some of the core things are the lines like, what is class war? Is this class war? Yes, this is class war. And then another one is, we're born, hired, disposed, things like that. I'm just wondering if you have any like major lessons that you as a listener, like in your, you know, adulthood, in like deep into your career, if there's a lesson that this song now teaches you kind of in hindsight about the world in general, about, you know, at your current age with your past experiences.
Yeah. So when I kind of revisited it and kind of pulled it apart for this podcast, I did kind of go through all the lyrics and was like, why this song? Like, it's not just a banger. Like, there's so much more to it, right? And I think that the line for me that says that I'm just a kid, I can't believe I got to worry about this kind of shit. And, you know, I think of like, again, as a teacher, and I always joke that I teach the littles, because even though in K to 8, I most teach K to 4. And I just think of like just all the things that they need to worry about, and like I'm trying to teach them, and my own child is 9, and you know I'm hoping that as a parent I've helped them contextualize some of the stuff more so that they have a framework to navigate it. But like even just to give you like a very quick example, we had some family in town this week, and of course one of my uncles went off on one of his little tangents that I just, you know, love. And the way that my child responded at 9 to him was just so cool.
Yeah.
In a way that as a 9-year-old, I would not have been able to be brave enough to do and call out, but also just like even understand what he was saying. Like I just would have gone along with it. I was very compliant at that age.
Yeah.
You know, and they were just like, well, what do you mean by that? Like, because we do this thing when we're trying to like call people out on their BS without being like super confrontational. Being like, I don't understand. What do you mean? Can you explain that? Like, and so when you say like the immigrants from that country, like, what do you mean by that? Like,
right.
I don't understand. And so like my own child was able to like kind of put him in his place in a very like, and it's just great to see a 9-year-old one up my uncle, you know?
Yeah. You know, and my immediate thought on that is that, you know, the term woke is bandied about on television nonstop in the US. And I think that one of the major reasons that term is so despised by so many people in the media and on television and in politics is that it teaches kids that they are allowed to push back on ridiculous things that we would have never had the guts to respond to 25 or 30 years ago. So I really think that the crux of the argument against woke by the American right is that kids are actually speaking up for all people now instead of just taking it and not saying anything.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the other, you had quoted this line, but it says, "We focus a moment, not in approval, bury our head back in the barcodes, while our former nemesis, the nation state." And I don't know why, like, cause this, I don't know, again, the song is saying a lot, but like, I was thinking of specifically, again, like my work in the Pride community and the queer community. And I was thinking about all of the like corporations who fund Pride events in June. Like, I don't know in Buffalo when you're Pride, most people it's in June. Some regions do it at different times. And like, it's like every year in June, I actually have started to really despise Pride because I'm like, I have some really great allies, some people who are in the trenches alongside with me doing the dirty work. And I absolutely adore them, you know? But then I have some people who I don't see or hear any advocacy from all year until June 1st. And then they're emailing me being like, "Oh, it's Pride. What book should I read?" And I'm like, oh, like, you need to be doing this work every day of the year. And it would be like, it's the same with like Black History Month, you know, like February 1st, I guarantee you, I get text messages and emails from really well-meaning people. Like, they really are people who want to bring in Black texts and Black authors and Black history. But I'm like, if February 1st is the first time that you are doing this work, it is too late. That is not going to work. And so I was thinking about the corporations who, like, you know, sponsor Pride parades or Pride events or Pride whatever, and they get their little logo, their corporate logo put on the pamphlets and stuff. And I just get so mad because I know that those corporations are not centering the work the other 11 months of the year. They're just putting the money in, and they're putting the work so that they can get basically free advertising at the Pride parade, you know?
Yeah.
And so, and I was thinking about just all the talk in this song about like the corporations and the enemy and the nemesis and stuff. And like that, my brain kind of went there about just like, you know, we're just these like sort of pawns in their parade, literally. Yeah. And they don't really care. And then the minute something more woke or more shiny, then they'll just put their little corporation stamp on that pamphlet without really any impact on what they're actually doing to and for that community, whether it's the LGBTQ community or, you know. And so that was kind of where I was thinking about when I was thinking about this song.
Amazing. Yeah, and it can go in so many different directions too, which is what is so wild about this song, is that every single word is almost a, you know, like an off-ramp onto a totally different line of thinking with a whole bunch of scholarly research and a whole bunch of historical examples behind it. And it's one of those ones that's so overwhelming to think about because of how much you can possibly learn if you really dive into the nuance of every single sentence of this song.
Well, and even just the fact that the puppeteer untouchable, I don't know if you meant to do this, but it's in brackets in the lyrics when you sent them to me.
What I did is I pulled the lyrics directly from the band's website. So I copied and pasted the lyrics exactly as the band has them written. So what jumped out to you about those brackets?
I don't know. To me, it's like, and you said you used to be an English teacher. Like, that's like, why is that in brackets? Like, I immediately was like, what do they want me to think about? Because it's in brackets. So it means they're like drawing attention to it in some way. They didn't need to do that. You know what I mean? And then later it says, the romance, right? And when I think of like the puppeteer untouchable, it's like, yeah, we're just kind of a bunch, like I said, like cogs in the machine, like the puppets, like they're making you dance, but like there's no accountability. Like when you call someone out or try and challenge a system or a supervisor or boss or a union, you know, whatever, thinking of like labor laws, like the guys at the top, their profit margins aren't being affected, their day-to-day life. It's the people on the front lines, like, that are going to lose their jobs. If you boycott Amazon, who's going to lose money? Like, I hate Amazon, but like if you boycott them, it's not the guy who owns Amazon that's going to, you know,
Right.
He's fine. He's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
But like the workers who are packing the boxes and making the toys, like that's who's going to lose their jobs or not have access to, you know, anything. So that was kind of what jumped out at me too about the class war too, and just like the very like distinct tiers of like the CEOs, the like upper tier, they're going to be okay. Doesn't matter what happens. And yeah, so that's kind of what I was thinking about.
Amazing. Well, let's jump forward 5 years to 2001's Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes, and you chose Back to the Motor League.
Death with the single fence and winners circle straight edge. Fuck off, who cares? I'd rather highlight triptychs and listen to your bullshit. Fuck off, who cares? A bunch of stupid things and shitty scenes and strong men you build up to burn never ceases to amaze. And as I'm suffering of perfection, reminds me of my own race. Redress my own debt is the real.
Which was, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, the lead single that was sent out into the world in advance of the record. And, you know, there's a really well-known tweet by Brendan Kelly from the Lawrence Arms, who once said, there are two types of punk rock songwriters, those who wrote Back to the Motor League and those who didn't. And so I love that tweet because you can just tell how much of a high regard this song is held by a lot of people in the music world who play music for a living. So tell me a little bit about why you chose Back to the Motor League for your third selection.
So I think we need to kind of jump forward in time for me now. So I'm living in East Vancouver with the band, going to like hardcore shows, metal shows. Like musically, I have evolved as a listener. But the people who are surrounding me at that time are like, all they talk about is music. Like the way I talk about books is the way they talked about music, right? And gear and amps and tube amp. Like I could go on at length. And Kevin, my friend Kevin, I'm giving him a shout out because I'm sending him this podcast when it's out there in the world.
Yes.
I love you, Kevin, but I do not want to hear you talk about gear anymore. So yeah, like 2004, living in East Van, going to all these like punk shows with band, living in that sort of world, right? Today's Empire just, it is just beginning to end. There are no, in my opinion, no stinkers on this album. It's just like solid beginning to end. There's not a single song that doesn't rock. It's so good. And it's also one of the only albums that we could all agree on. It was like metal enough for the metalheads in the band and the metal guys we were hanging out with. It was hardcore enough. It was punk enough. Like whenever we were just sitting around drinking beers and talking about music, this would be the album that we could all put on that no one would like argue and like get mad at, right? So I think for me, this album as a whole is just like the memory of that time, like that nostalgia of that was just a really great time in my life. Like I was 24 years old, living in Vancouver, just rocking it and having a great time. And Back to the Motor League. So I hadn't seen Propaganda for a while. I'd gone to all the all ages shows here, but then they hadn't come to Vancouver, or maybe I just didn't have money. Like I was pretty poor when I was living there. So I hadn't seen them. And so when this album came out, they toured through Vancouver and I saw them like upstairs in like a Legion or something. It was like a really weird venue that I saw them in. Yeah, this song just came on and I was just like, yep, that's it. Like it just, the way it opens, and like, I like to party fucking hard. I like my rock and roll the same. Like I was like, yes, yes, I love this song. But I also felt that it was like really making fun of bros. And so you would go to a Propaganda show and this song would come on and it was almost like two distinct crowds
Yeah.
formed the song. And it was like, oh, you don't know that this song is criticizing you. That's this crowd over here, right? You're like drunk and starting fights in the mosh pit crowd. That's you.
Yeah.
And then there was like us being like, oh, we're making fun of you for starting fights in the mosh pit sort of crowd. And it really sort of like, you could really see the divide of like who kind of understood propaganda. And now I sound really elite. I feel like I sound really snobby and elite, like, oh, you're the true propaganda fans. But like kind of could see that divide of like, I think there were people whose first taste of propaganda was Back to the Motor League. That was like, that was the song. And if that was the song that introduced you to the band, I don't know if you could understand the band. Does that make sense?
Sure, absolutely.
That's what I was thinking about for that.
Nice. Do you have any particular lines that you really love in the song? Like later on, there's so many little good one-liners and stuff. I love the I love like the Dead Kennedys reference of chicken form us. That's a really cool one. I always love that.
I also just love the like play acting anarchists and Mummy's Little Skinheads.
Yeah.
Like that really jumped out to me of like, yeah, like everybody knows who they're talking, like you know someone in your life, or you've seen someone at a show, or you've seen, who's just like putting it on, who's just like showing up and putting it on just for the sake of showing up and looking cool or whatever that is, you know what I mean? And I just think like, and that's what I mean, like they're just calling all that crap, that like scenester crap out by creating a scenester song.
Nice.
I don't know how else to explain it. Like, I guess one of the ways I could think about is, so did you ever watch the show or the movie Team America that the South Park guys put on?
Yeah, definitely.
Years and years ago. So whether you're a fan of it or not, like that's besides the point. But I had gone down to Seattle to a show, and there's a bunch of us that went down, and we actually watched Team America in Seattle in a like United States theater with America. And like we laughed at totally different jokes. Like the things that like my little small group of Canadian friends found funny in that movie were very different than the reactions of like the Americans in the crowd. You know what I mean? And obviously the Americans kind of knew what they were getting into. Like you can't go to Team America without knowing what you're getting into. But and like Seattle's like 2 hours from Vancouver, like really we're not that far geographically apart, but there was definitely like a distinct like, these are the things that are landing for your crowd and these are the things that are landing for our crowd. You know what I mean? Kind of is like that experience again of like, and I've been the first to be called like a poser. Like I said, I don't know the bands, I don't know the songs. Like the guys always made fun of me for being like, you don't even know who you're talking about and you're wearing their t-shirt. Like, come on. And I'm like, I've lived in this world for 20 years now. Like, just because I don't remember the name of the bass player on the album in 1986 doesn't mean I don't like them. Like,
I love how this, I love that comparison of maybe this is like the Team America world police of the punk rock world. That is super, super funny. I love that. What an amazing observation. Cool. Well, let's jump forward a little more. So we're skipping Potemkin because we already talked about Bringer of Greater Things, and we're jumping forward to supporting cast. And you chose Dear Coach's Corner. Tell me why you chose it.
Oh man. This one's a tough one to talk about. So I think for me, so I did listen to part. It was quite a long episode that you folks did on Coach's Corner. I think it was like over 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm assuming most of your audience has sort of the background to like who Don Cherry is, who Ron McLean is, who Grapes is. Like that's kind of all a part of this conversation. And I grew up in a hockey home where we watched every Saturday night Hockey Night in Canada. And my dad is one of the biggest Don Cherry fans.
Interesting.
Yeah. And my brother, I am not a sport person. I am like so uncoordinated. I'm the person on the sidelines who is cheering my heart out for you because I think you're doing swell and I love it, but I'm not athletic in any capacity. I just don't have that gene. But I grew up in hockey rinks, you know, following my brother, eating rink burgers. Like it's just so entrenched in the culture. You can't not be a hockey person if you live, I think, in rural Saskatchewan anyway. And I think for me, it just didn't, like, all along I didn't fit, you know, like, and I thought there was like something wrong with me. Like, I was like, why are all these people thinking this guy is great? Like, why is this culture so like gross? Like, but everybody's doing it, like everybody loves it, so like there must be something wrong with me, you know what I mean? Like I must not understand it. Maybe it's because I'm not good at sports, maybe it's because I don't know, right? Like so for a really long time I think I thought the problem was me not fitting in, just being the weird one, you know. I was always like the black sheep, the weird one, like all whatever name you want to call it. And so then as I started sort of thinking and being more critical and reading and opening up to like different ideas and seeing more things and all of this stuff, I was like, oh, like this is why I don't fit in. Like there are other people who think like me. There are other people who don't agree with this sort of, I call it bro culture or like toxic masculinity, whatever you want to call it. But like I said, I grew up with it. Like it's just, you know, and like there's a really awful derogatory term that I don't know if it's still being used, but in high school we called girls puck fucks because they just wanted to go and sleep with hockey players because that's what you did in small towns. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is just so gross. Like it's just so disgusting. But it's just like it was just so normalized to the point where if you did try and call it out or like kind of rub up against it or bump up against it, like you were alienated and ostracized and like left to the margins, you know what I mean? And so I think in the same way that like Showdown, I was saying, is sort of like a battle of my own two selves.
Yeah.
I feel like Coach's Corner is like that, like friction of the relationship with my dad, you know, and like growing up with him. And I adore my dad. We are so close. I love him. You know, he's fixing my minivan today for me because that's what good dads do. You know what I mean? But, you know, we are politically and philosophically on very opposite ends of the spectrum, to the point where there have been times where my mom, who's kind of a very lovely peacekeeping mediator between the two of us, of like, we aren't talking about politics at the table anymore. Like this is over. I'm not having Raylee leave in anger anymore because you two are fighting about policy or government or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so when I think, I'm just going to pull up the lyrics here for Coach's Corner, like when I think of that relationship growing up with my dad and all of the wonderful things he's taught me, as well as all of the things he taught me that I needed to unpack and untrench and undo almost, right? And I say my dad is sort of like the royal dad, royal we, like that culture of men in small town Saskatchewan. Like it could be my dad, it could be any of my uncles. Like I was saying, my own kid was kind of calling out my uncle this week. You know what I mean? Like that sort of generation of men as like my dad is sort of representative of that royal we, right?
Yeah.
And I just think like the song itself is like, if we just want to talk like not the lyrics, it's just like a totally different vibe. It's so like it's longer, it's more introspective, it's more it's not a banger. Like, this isn't one of my banger songs, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he just, you can really hear it in Chris's voice that he's just like, he's trying to make peace with, again, like how I was trying to reconcile the two selves of myself. Like, I feel my interpretation of his thoughts, and I don't want to speak for you, Chris, is that he's trying to reconcile loving these two things that are counterproductive to each other. Like, how can I be this human and also want to do these things, but this culture is so awful for this thing? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I really feel it like coming through in his voice and in the music in a way that was new to me when I think about Propaganda. Like, I feel like this song has a really different just energy to it. That made me really stop and be like, holy, this is Propaganda? Like, what's going on here? This doesn't sound like, like, kind of threw me for a loop. So then when I think about that, like I said, like, there was a contest. I don't know if it was an official contest or just some media click yes and no, do a voter poll or whatever for like world or best Canadian, like,
Yeah.
to try and vote for who you think should represent Canada as like the best Canadian, right?
Yeah.
And like, Grapes was on the list.
Yeah.
I want to find this. I will find it for you. It's quite a few years old now. But the other person was, do you know who Tommy Douglas is?
I do. Yeah.
Okay. So, Tommy Douglas is not without his flaws. I don't want to like rah Tommy Douglas, but father of universal health care, which is what
Right.
people really think about Canada and love about Canada, right?
Yeah.
And like, I'm like, how can you vote for Don Cherry over Tommy? Like, even if you hate the NDP, even if you are not voting left, like, you are saying that this ranting racist bro is better and should be representative of our country, and Tommy Douglas shouldn't be? Like, are you even kidding me right now? Like, and a lot of people voted for Grapes. Like, a lot of people really, because of the hatred of the NDP here, Tommy Douglas you can't separate Tommy Douglas. Sorry, NDP is one of our political parties here for some of your listeners who might not be familiar.
Yeah.
They tend to be more left leaning, definitely center left in my opinion, but so he can't be, and there's a lot of people, the right wing people really hate the NDP. It's very entrenched. And so because Tommy Douglas was leader of the NDP, like, he can't be separated from that.
Right.
Like, but like, healthcare dudes, like, you can break your arm for free.
Yeah.
And you're saying that Don Cherry should be representative of us as a society. Like, and so like, yeah. So I feel like the friction between Ron MacLean and Don Cherry sort of almost represented like, I felt like that friction between my dad and I, where Ron MacLean was just like, hey, but like, why don't we stay on topic? Or like, let's talk about the things that matter. I wouldn't say that Ron MacLean is a particularly progressive, left leaning. Like, I don't know what he is politically, but comparatively, he's pretty progressive, right?
Yeah.
And so I kind of felt like, yeah, that the song just really sort of represents, like I said, like, I went out to that small town party and no one knew what heteronormativity meant. And I was like, I still like you guys, and I grew up with you, and I'm so nostalgic for the memories that I have with you, and you're good guys. These are the guys that, like, if something happened to my family tomorrow, that's the community that would show up on my doorstep with casseroles and feed me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's what small towns do, and small communities do. But yet, like, there's so many things about your ideologies and so how do I reconcile that? And how do I reconcile like these conversations I have with my dad? And like I said, as I'm trying to set a better example for my own child and how to navigate that so that they don't come up against the same things I did. you know, like, in giving them the language to be able to kind of call these people out. And they did it with their uncle and stuff, right? And like, it's a tough road to navigate.
Definitely.
And yeah, so that was kind of my thinking when I was thinking about this song and why I put it back on the list after I had originally taken it off. And then I was listening to it. I'm like, no, I need to talk about my dad. Everybody, we need to talk about my dad.
You know, something I'm really loving is that you chose Dear Coach's Corner to kind of discuss like masculinity and maleness as opposed to refusing to be a man. Like, I really like that you picked something that was, you know, you could have picked either song to kind of talk about that topic. And I love that you went with Coach's Corner. And I just looked up that contest, The Greatest Canadian, and it was from 2004. I have the top 10 results here. There are
good. I'm so glad you found it.
Yeah, there are no women on the top 10. So apparently no women are within the top 10 greatest Canadians ever, according to this poll. So that's something to unpack. But Tommy Douglas, the premier of Saskatchewan, who is the father of universal healthcare in Canada, is number one. David Suzuki, the environmentalist, name that a lot of people will know, and he is ranked number 5. Lester Pearson, the 14th premier of Canada, which is where Toronto's airport is named after, is number 6. Right. Don Cherry is number 7. And Don Cherry did beat Sir John Macdonald, the first Prime Minister of Canada. He also beat Alexander Graham Bell and Wayne Gretzky. So apparently Don Cherry is considered a greater Canadian than Wayne Gretzky, which that was pretty surprising.
So I'm assuming, if you still have that thing up, was it across Canada, the vote? Because if it would have been Saskatchewan specific, I don't think Tommy Douglas would have ranked that high.
Yeah, no, it was all Canada. It was for sure The Greatest Canadian is a 2004 TV series as well. So there were, there were approximately 500,000 viewers per episode on the series. And the initial process nomination phase received more than 10,000 names. And the second phase of the process was the voting, where Tommy Douglas was given to be the winner. So yeah, you can find that. It's like
surprised he voted that high.
Yeah, 13 episodes. And so you could probably find that. It came out on CBC, and you could probably find the whole thing on YouTube. So if anybody's out there looking to watch that, that would be something you could track down if you felt like it.
Thanks for finding that. That's really cool. And I think too, this song, came out in 2009. I became a parent in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, when it's talking about it takes such a village to raise a child, but just a flag to raise a child. And I think now, as I'm seeing again, my own child who takes after their mother, sports, not their strongest, best feature,
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to be, and they don't want to be. They're not interested. They love drawing and art and comic books and reading, and they want to be a mycologist when they grow up.
Cool.
You know what that means? Like a mushroom specialist.
Yeah.
That's the kind of kid that I have, and I love them, and they're just amazing. But so now they're trying to kind of navigate that sort of bro patriarchy culture. And, my dad has softened a bit after years of conflict with me. And he knows now that I can put up with it because I can hold my own. I have my own sort of thoughts, and but he knows that if he starts saying that stuff around my kid, we're done. We're gone, we leave. I'm like, they don't need to hear this. No, not okay. So he has sort of started kind of biting his tongue a little bit more because he loves us and he wants us to hang out. And so, yeah, I feel like I'm really talking trash about my dad. He really is, again, a really great guy. But
I don't get that impression at all.
Would have really voted for Don Cherry, and definitely is the woke culture is a problem, and troops, and military, and F Russia,
right.
Those are the things that he would say. And yeah, so growing up, that was just always what I had to navigate. And I think that this song sort of encompasses what I did and so many other people, you know, between that Ron McLean and Don Cherry sort of dichotomy. And
Amazing.
I remember one more quick, when I lived in Vancouver, I was there for the 2010 Olympics.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, I mean, sure, but like there was a lot of conflict because I mean, how much money do we spend on this? Well, our houseless people are on the streets with no harm reduction, you know,
Right.
like, and just all the displacement of people and movement of marginalized folks to accommodate this big raw party of just pomp and circumstance. And I remember just really struggling with like, man, these athletes have worked so hard, you know, like they deserve, like they've just worked so hard. But it's just, to me, the Olympics is also can be really elitist, because who has money to play sports, especially hockey, you know, like poor people don't have money to play hockey. I work in a really impoverished community school. Like those kids, they don't get those same opportunities, right? They don't have a parent who can drive them to the hockey rink at 6 a.m. and then again at 4:30, you know? But that doesn't diminish the athletic expertise that is that athlete, but it is really, yeah, it's really classist. It's really, and you know, Canada won the gold medal in the last minutes, and I heard the crowd cheering because I was like 10 blocks away from where it was happening, and I was like, it was just a really weird feeling of like, I'm proud, but also I'm not proud. I don't know. How do we do that, Chris? How do I do that? And this song helps me figure that out.
Yeah. And I think that he's still, you know, one of the things he might say, or, you know, I would never speak for him, obviously, but continue to work on those feelings within yourself to, you know, think about it and adapt and adjust and continue to grow, and don't just stay stagnant in your views, because it's easy. And it's easier to be lazy than to think and change and grow.
The other reason I wanted to put this song, like, because I had originally removed it and wanted to talk about greater things. And then again, because of the advocacy and work that I do for the LGBTQ community, like, because right now, have you been hearing all the controversy about the Pride nights with the NHL? Do you follow the NHL?
Oh, yeah. I was watching the whole Eric Stahl meltdown and all that stuff going on.
Yeah. And so, you know, it's still like 2023, and here we are, not like, and so someone said, like, how do you feel about the NHL Pride jerseys or the Pride nights or whatever, however your team chooses to, or whatever, acknowledge it. And we had a lacrosse team here that's a really big provincial lacrosse team do a Pride night, and they were basically, and they got so called out because lacrosse is very bro culture generally. And they were just like, screw you guys, like, we don't care. And they had a drag queen perform, like, they were just like, nope, don't care. Like, so they really did a good job of just being like, nope, and they shut it down, right?
Wow. Yeah.
But I almost think that these Pride nights, and now the controversy, like pushback that's coming from the players, and some teams, I guess, is actually doing like more damage to our community in a lot of ways, because it's like, again, if I bring it back to like the Pride Month example of June, it's like, I know who shows up on June 1st with their rainbow shirt and pin on. And I know who is there every step along the way, the other 364 days a year, you know? And I feel like these Pride nights are kind of a micro or a macro, like a bigger example of that, where it's like, you can't force representation. You can't, people like, by doing it and now allowing these players to like not participate and have these huge conversations on national media, like, do you know how harmful that is and how sad that is for some poor little kid who wants to play hockey, who might also be queer or have a queer brother or queer sibling or trans, and now they're having to reconcile like, oh, but my favorite hockey player won't show support to my family. Do I have to choose? Like, and I think that like spontaneous representation is much more meaningful. Like, I'm going to sit there and notice some hockey player who put rainbow tape to tape up their hockey stick. That's going to go much further for me than some sort of performative one night flash in a pan rainbow jerseys.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. The controversy around it has been really interesting to watch, especially on social media, like watching all the teams put out their statements and things like that has been, and then scrolling through the comments, really interesting. And
Yeah.
I mean, I know that people always say never read the comments, but I always do, because I find it to be important to see what people are thinking and hearing and talking about. So I don't even mind reading the comments, because I think that it's important to see what's going on.
I've stopped arguing with the comments. I will read them, but I can't engage anymore.
Yeah.
It's too much. It's too harmful. I would be up all night and all day, like, and angry all the time. I don't want to be an angry person all the time,
Yeah.
So I've stopped arguing with those people, because it's not worth it.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so I think it's really interesting. So what's like, 13 years later, we're still having this, 14 years later, and we're still having this conversation between woke and unwoke, sleepy.
Right.
I don't know what's the opposite of woke.
It's
racist. I don't know.
It's crazy.
And like, things haven't changed. That culture is just so entrenched.
Yeah. Well, Raylee, I am very delighted by our 4.5-ish songs that we discussed. I loved hearing from you. I loved hearing your connection to the band as somebody who is, from Saskatchewan, a prairie Canadian, essentially. I love it. I love the perspectives that you've brought in and the personal stories that you've told. And I'm wondering if you can just send us out here on a note to the listeners on where they can find you, what to follow, and any concluding thoughts that you may have as far as like bringing this in for a landing.
Yeah, like I said, just wanted to thank you for inviting me to come on.
You're so welcome.
Banter back and forth on Twitter really paid off in this conversation. I really have appreciated unpacking this band and really dissecting it in a way. It's I don't know if it was possible, but it's actually made me, I think, appreciate them even more. Like this last 3 weeks or whatever it is since you threw out that invite, and me talking to all my friends and really thinking about, and the nostalgia. I've been reminiscing about the shows and the memories and the jam space and listening to Back to the Motor League, and that's just made me feel all warm and fuzzy and having those memories. So that's been really fun. I didn't know that Propaganda and their angry lyrics could make me feel so warm and fuzzy, but it does. So you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at QueerEd or QueerEd _podcast. There's a username. You can email me at queeredpodcast@gmail.com, but the best place to find us is Instagram. That's where we kind of do most of our posting and new episodes coming up. And email us if you need book suggestions. Representation is just I cannot say it enough. If you need help finding a book about a specific topic or a specific character, or just to spark a conversation, please reach out. Brendan and I would love to chat with you and help, or just have a conversation with you about what that could look like in your classroom, in your learning space, or your family. Because sometimes it's happening in your kids' school and you want to know how to talk about it with your kids at home, and maybe that's a new conversation for you. And just know that representation is just so important if we want to help these kids grow into cool punk adults.
Amazing. Well, Raylee, thank you so much for joining me to chat Propaganda. It's been a real pleasure.
This has been awesome. Thanks, Greg.